Good morning. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning.
Good morning, Keith.
So
Hey,
glad to see you in person.
likewise, it's really good to see you looking so well, Keith. Thanks for the
Oh,
invite.
excellent. So glad you're here. We usually we use the first 10 minutes here just to, connect and make sure all the moderators are connecting, and then we'll be turning our videos off, and we will promptly begin the recording at 8:05. And we are very excited to play your welcoming remarks for today.
Well, thanks for your gracious invitation. I'll have to tell you, Keith, this has sort of put a new spring in my step this last couple of weeks, sort of re-engaging with colleagues old and new. And I'm working on a long manuscript on purposes and planning of reefs, and some of the information is just great. So thank you.
Excellent. So glad to hear that. Yeah, we've compressed a lot down into a very short amount of time. Normally these would be 3 full days. So it's incredible what we're doing in these half day.
Well, I've been into the global literature, and as I reflect on the last couple of days of the summit, Florida is back to setting the curve. I had sort of had been a lull in the scientific work, but listening to Chris Stallings, that holistic approach, just for example, and then some, a lot of the other campuses and research institutes, is really marvelous. And the sleeping giant in all of this are the graduate student studies, just really wonderful. So
Yes.
anyhow, well done.
We were very pleased to have a few of them connect with us last night for our little happy hour at 5:30 as well on Zoom. So that was invigorating. A mix of some old stories and new people, new graduate students that are just getting involved. So
yeah, is it just you and I online at the moment?
No, I
No,
see.
I'm
If you push the participants button, you can see who else is online.
Oh, 5
Christine.
participants.
Mm-hmm. You can see
Right,
Christine.
Angela, Christine, Eric.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We're ninjas.
Keith, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Angela.
Okay, great. And can you see my screen?
Yes, you can see your
Okay.
screen, and there is no black rectangle.
Yeah, not yet. Hopefully it stays away today. It stayed away most of yesterday, so.
And it depends on the size of the presentations. For the ones that are the old, square shape, actually it's good because that square covers the time code.
The time, right.
Okay, well, I'm seeing Angela sort of real time here. It's great to meet you, Angela, after all this great correspondences.
It is so nice to meet you too, Bill. I've heard a lot about you being from Sea Grant fame, and John Stevely is one of my dear friends, and he has nothing but good things to say about you.
Well, he's a fellow Long Islander, so I guess he has to.
Right.
Are you from Long Island, Bill? You grew up in Long Island?
Yeah.
I did not know this. Me too.
Really? Where?
West Hempstead, Franklin Square.
Okay, well, my mother was born in Brooklyn, got married in Hempstead, and I grew up in North Merrick and Belmore.
Okay, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah, my dad grew up in Glendale, and my mom and my grandparents moved to West Hempstead in the 1920s. So
yeah, well, what a small world. That's great.
Yeah, it sure is.
Well, we could bore Christine and Eric and Angela with stories about going to Jones Beach and fishing out of Zach's Bay and Captree Boat Basin.
Yep. Fire Island.
Great.
Yeah.
My dad's from Long Island. Now I feel like I'll have to ask him stories so I can participate in your reminiscing.
Yeah. Yeah, it was such a great place to grow up. I mean, you're in the New York City metropolitan area, but yet you're further out on the island where it was a little bit more pastoral. and you
Yeah.
sort of had the best of both worlds. But I was back there a couple of years ago, and it's just so crowded. It always reminds me of the Florida Gold Coast, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, out east, it's still this very much the same. Orient Point and Greenport, those communities have maintained their character.
Yeah.
I'm going to call Kent Smith. I'm going to mute right now.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to ask. Christine, do you know if it's you and Kent moderating now this session?
Yeah, I emailed
Okay,
him
great.
this morning. He was responsive. I don't know if he has this link or he's waiting for you to post it.
Okay.
The
Yeah, I'll post
summit.
it at exactly 8 o'clock. I want to minimize how many people we have to manage until 8. But I wanted to remind everyone with that that this session is being recorded at the very beginning, just so that people are aware. Thank you.
Yeah, I have that ready to go. I did have a question. Do we just run right into the next session, or do I need to ask them to click out and then join the new link?
The link is the same. So all
It's
of
the
the
same.
speakers and all of the participants have the same link for both of, because we just split this session into tiny bits, but we're not making a separate Zoom for the second part. There's no
Okay.
break. There's only a separate Zoom if there's a break.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I just that's what I saw yesterday happen. So I just thought that's how it was going to run today. So perfect. I was correct.
Good. Okay, and I see Kent is now on.
Mute start video. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Morning, Kent.
Keith just called me to make sure that I chime in now before everything starts. I've just been coming on, as everything begins. So, but Christine, looking forward to working with you this morning. I've got a few questions ready, and I will definitely defer to you for all the logistics on the next step, but I'll try to keep things moving along.
Yeah, I got all the housekeeping stuff, so you don't worry about that. And then, like I said, I'll jot down some questions too in case it's a little slow on the Q&A. But
okay. Well, no worries. Hopefully it won't be. Usually when you get into some of this permitting stuff, people have all kinds of very detailed, specific questions, which is good. But it is kind of a dry topic, so some of the answers tend to be pretty cut and dry, like no.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we've also had a lot of speakers answer the questions in the chat throughout the presentations too. So I'll make sure if there needs to be an expanded answer on that, I'll jot it down. But if it's been answered, then I'll just leave it stand and just only record the ones that haven't been addressed.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. Hey, you guys, I just wanted to say y'all are running quite a good show, by the way. I've been on each day, and it's really good to see everything's moved, really efficiently and well, and there hasn't been any problems in terms of communication or getting online. It's really a good option.
Hopefully it stays that way. Thank you, Kent.
Yeah. I don't think you have to worry, Angela, at this point. I think everything's pretty locked in, and everyone knows how to operate stuff now. So it'll go fine today.
And Angela, before it's 8 o'clock, can you make me and Kent co-hosts, or at least me co-host?
Yeah, I'll make you both co-hosts right now. So Kent, that'll give you the ability to mute people if you need to.
Oh, I love control. Thank you.
Luckily, we haven't really had any issues. I think a few people have popped up by accident in the video, but we haven't had anyone overtalk any presentation.
No, everybody's been very, very gracious and done real well. So it's hard though, when you're on here, because sometimes there's a slight delay. I think Zoom's a little better than Teams in that regard, but it depends on bandwidth. So we'll be good though, I'm sure.
Yeah, and so most of it looks like several of the steering committee members are already on. I see Anna and I see Scott, and they are also co-hosts, so they also have the ability to help you guys out if need be.
Okay. Well, hopefully it'll go pretty smoothly. I'm not worried.
I'm a superstitious person. You're making me knock on wood over here.
Well, here, I'll help you.
I was thinking the exact same thing. Kent, shh.
I will. I will. Well, I actually know Bill Siemens and Lisa Lovern, so that's good. I don't know the other folks, but I've worked with them over the years, so that'll be nice. And we are including, I'm going back in, we are including Bill in this first Q&A session, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Can you
Okay.
hear me now? I've been trying to jump in and I realized I was on mute. So a couple content things. Well, number one, yes, Bill Seaman is the welcoming speaker. So definitely ask, throw a question out for Bill to maybe get things started. Also, take a look when we go onto the play, push the play button, take a look in the lobby and look at the results from yesterday's survey. And you will see in the word cloud that funding and permitting emerged as the top issue. So even though like you say, it's a dry subject, it is very important to many, many people. And so that could be a good segue and linkage back to the survey that people have been connecting with. Another thing, this is maybe more for Christine. In Lisa's presentation, I didn't realize it until I rewatched it. She is showing the old 2014 material guidelines. She is not showing the 2020 version. So when that pops up, I'll probably throw in the March 2020 version. And then Kent, let's go ahead or you can change your name if you click on the three dots in the top right corner. So you can capitalize your name and put a comma FWC on there. I think it's nice to have the affiliation on there as well for people to see.
The three dots up here, change my name. Okay. Mute, mute. Rename. Okay. Well, let me see if it'll let me. Might not.
Oh, it should, because you're co-host or someone else can do it for you. Oh, the gray box popped up, Angela.
I got it.
Angela's got everything.
I don't know about that, man. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Bill.
Hey,
Good
Bill.
morning. Good morning, Kent. Hadn't seen you in a while.
I know. Good to see you, man.
Well, there, now you can see me. I'll shut it off.
Hey, guys, I'm just going to let you know I just posted the link, so you're going to start getting people.
Okay, so we'll be turning our video and mics off. Thank you, everyone. Well, I guess we could stay on for a little bit just to welcome everyone. Thank you for connecting. We are going to be starting promptly at 8:05. I see Bill Siemens got his full cup of coffee going.
Just for the record, it's tea.
Okay.
my daily green tea to start the day. I'll be quiet.
Yeah, Keith, do we stay in here? We stay in this mode?
Yes, we will all turn off our videos and we will all mute at exactly 8:05.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Christine, for finding that link. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, Keith. This is Amelia. I just want to make sure you can hear me okay.
Yes, we can hear you just fine, Amelia. We look forward to your participation during the Q&A session.
Good morning, Keith. This is Lance. Can you hear me?
Good morning, Lance. We can hear you loud and clear.
Excellent. Thank you.
Keith, it's Eric. Can you hear me?
Yes, Eric, we can hear you. Yep. Well, this is going to be an exciting session. We're covering a lot more ground, delving into these topics. Looks like we're up to 44 participants.
Good morning.
3 minutes and counting.
Good morning, Keith. This is Victor. Can you hear me?
Yes, Victor. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Keith. Ed Kalakauskas.
Good morning, Ed Kalakauskas from Jacksonville.
Hey, Keith and all, do you see just the black screen now?
We see the black screen.
Okay, and I'll hit play at exactly 8:05, but for now you'll just see the black, and then I'll obviously let me know at 8:05 and half a millisecond if you don't hear sound.
Sounds good. We have 55 people standing by. Good morning, everyone. We'll be starting in less than 1 minute.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. It's Lisa Lovren with the Corps.
Good morning, Lisa. We are going to be muting and we're starting in about 20 seconds.
Excellent.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Keith, and all your associates for the gracious invitation to offer words of welcome to this concluding session of the 2020 Florida Artificial Reef Summit. I'm speaking today from the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, where we live alongside the headwaters of the Shenandoah River, 3,100 feet above sea level. Even here, I feel connected to you in several ways, one of which is through my post-retirement efforts locally to coordinate 2 studies of water quality in our watershed. And the fact that what's in the stream here can wind up in the Gulf of Mexico, where some of you are working on coastal ecosystems. My sense this morning is that welcoming words at this time of day, while we're all still getting collected, ought to be short and sweet. So in these few minutes, I'd like to offer some observations that might go well with our cups of coffee and tea, using 4 words: ecosystems, meta-analysis, evaluation, and artificial. I'll keep it short and simple. My reason for selecting these words is that they are treated in the global technical literature concerning human-made reefs. And I've been reading them and sometimes rereading them in the course of preparing an extended manuscript reviewing reef planning and purposes globally, both from scientific and the practitioner's aspects. And by the way, I'm up to about 20 specific purposes for human-made reefs, many of which we really don't see in the United States or Florida. So with that said, our first word is ecosystem. And I should note that in my reading, especially for coral reefs, but more recently for human-made reefs as well, the literature is increasingly addressing the ecosystem services they provide, such as food, biodiversity, recreation, and numerous others. Concerning the growing prominence of ecosystem-based management for the ocean environment, it may help our planning of human-made reefs to consider them in the broader context of marine ecosystem services and goods and spatial planning. Next word, meta-analysis. And I have to say, in truth, this is a pretty new term for me. A recent review of ecological and socioeconomic research concerning human-made reefs depicted an exponential increase in the number of articles appearing in just the last decade or so. Among these articles, we have some important meta-analyses, such as the one presented by Avery Paxton and colleagues at this conference concerning reef ecological function. Another paper by Alistair Becker and colleagues found that more than a third of fisheries management relevant papers lacked clear statements of objectives for the reefs studied. None stated an objective quantitatively. So, next word, evaluation. Despite numerous calls in the literature over decades for quantitative evaluation of reef performance, such research seems to be lacking. One area where I found this to be especially true is for recreational fishery catch and effort at intentionally placed reefs. In fact, in exchanging messages with Keith on the subject, we tended to agree that publications are hard to find. Fortunately, upcoming talks this morning will shed light on the subject. Finally, I had another word, artificial, and wanted to ask the question, when do artificial reefs stop being artificial? But time's up. So I had the privilege of working with Sea Grant Extension agent Scott Andre, whom many of you remember from his work in Tallahassee, to launch the very first Reef Summit in 1987. 3 decades later, and the program just keeps getting better and better. Congratulations to the organizing committee and all the contributors and attendees for such a well-rounded, informative, meaningful, exciting, and insightful exchange. Have a great morning.
Good morning, and I'd like to introduce Victor Blanco. He's the Taylor County Sea Grant Marine Extension agent, and he's been managing the artificial reefs in Taylor County for the past 4 years, and he's connecting to us from his office in Perry, Florida. Welcome, Victor.
Thank you, Keith. And yes, I work with UF Extension and Florida Sea Grant as the Marine Extension agent in Taylor County, and today I'm going to talk about artificial reef monitoring and how we build a citizen science-based program here. So artificial reef monitoring, the goal of the monitoring will be based on the objective of the artificial reef mainly. So through the monitoring, we can check different aspects about the artificial reef per se, like its location, the status of the material, the ecological part, how the fish assemblages are doing. We can check invasive species, public issues, and more likely to have records on videos and pictures of the materials. So one of the ways we do the monitoring is through fish counts. And we do the fish counts to compare fish populations between the habitats, so we can compare within the different types of materials. And that information can be used by different users, like scientists for stock assessment, or even by some of our stakeholders for business applications. Officially, FWC has been performing some fish census surveys along the time. We see that they peak around the middle of the 90s, and then the number of surveys decrease. So it's been about 10 surveys or so per year. And we have more than 3,500 patch reefs in Florida. So other organizations have come into place to try to fill that gap. Here are some of them which perform monitoring at the county levels. But there are more organizations around the state trying to collect data on the artificial reefs. So here in Taylor County, we started our artificial reef program back in 1995 at Boca Reef, which is located 22 miles offshore. And it quickly became a very popular recreational fishing spot. So through the monitoring, what we want to do is to identify and understand the fish structure associated with artificial reef and assess the structures per se. So what we did is we received grant funds from FDVC and from some partners like Perry Taylor Chamber of Commerce. And with those funds, we created our citizen science program. So first, what we did is we created a social media campaign through internet and Facebook page to enroll new volunteer divers willing to support our citizen science program. Initially, we have 86 divers sign up. And the first part of the program, of course, was to get all these volunteer divers trained. So in 2018, we started our training sessions with 30 volunteers. This year we added 10 more volunteers for the training, and that training is in 2 sessions. One is an online module where they go through the fish identification, they get familiar with the different species of fish that we're going to see in our artificial reefs. And then we had an in-person training session where we went through the fish census and assessment methods. So the way we train our volunteer divers for this citizen science program was to do 2 different methods. One is the stationary method or the bonsai banner method, and also the reef roving diving method. I'm not gonna go in detail of this. Most of us are familiar with these methods, right? So we started in 2018 with 18 sites or 18 patch reef within Boca Reef. And then we reduced that number to 6 in 2019, and we're gonna continue with those 6 sites, which is a good representation of all different materials that we have within Boca Reef. Volunteer divers have invested around 868 total hours during the collection of data, which 76 minutes are only diving, 76 hours are only diving hours. That represents an equivalent of $20,000 in contributions. And through the data collected, they have identified 29 species of 17 different families using the stationary method, and 35 species of 23 families using the roving dive counts. Here are some of our forms. Besides the fish counts, we collect data on other aspects like water conditions, bottom, the reef data, and the dive data. Here are some of the pictures of our groups before we went out diving. And one of the most important things that we did is to collect, to create this YouTube channel, which is Boca Reef Taylor County YouTube. You can go there and you will see short videos, 30 seconds to 1 minute, which help us check the quality of the data, and also is being used for the retraining of the divers, and also for our stakeholders, so they can go online and check the reef materials and the fish that they might find there. Also with that data, we did an assessment, a comparison between how the different materials were doing in Boca Reef. Of course, here in this graph, we can assume that scrap metal is doing much better attracting fish. All the different colors represent different species, but also it's important to mention that the scrap metal have a larger footprint, right? At the end, we want to bring back this information to our stakeholders. So what we create is infographics like this one we see here, where we show them the different sport fish or where they can find this fish. So if they're targeting a specific species, they can go into a specific type of reef material to get that fish. What we are doing next is still trying to get more people involved at the local level. And recently we purchased an underwater drums so we can go and collect data during the fall and winter time when the water is very cold, and it's very difficult to get the divers down in the water. And I would recommend, if you want to get involved in the monitoring program at your local level, you can contact your local artificial reef program manager, and or contact FUC for more information. And really looking forward to take your questions. So I appreciate your attention and thank you very much.
I'd like to introduce Chip Baumberger. He's with CSA Ocean Sciences. He's connecting to us from his home in Fort Pierce. He's been with CSA Ocean Sciences now for 10 years. Their company's done a lot of artificial reef over the decades, and they're also a bronze sponsor with for the Artificial Reef Summit. Welcome, Chip, and take it away.
I'm going to be talking a little bit about our underwater mapping of the Osborne Tire Reef that we did for Olson. If you're not familiar with it, it was a early and somewhat maybe misguided opportunity to create artificial reef using recycled tires from Goodyear, and they bound them up, as you can see in the image on the left, into bundles of 10 to 20 tires and dropped them off of barges. And they also managed to get the all the locals involved in conducting, I don't know, some volunteerism. There's some people at the boat ramp there collecting tires, and anybody, that seems, with a boat could go out there and dump some tires here. And then this is the commencement celebration for the artificial reef. This was in the Sun Sentinel, Keith told me, in about 72. And Goodyear was on hand with the blimp to drop the golden tire to celebrate the artificial reef. A few years later, in the early 80s, this is kind of what everyone was used to seeing. A lot of the bands broke. It was a fiber, it wasn't metal, and it broke down within 10 years or so. This is what it looked like the first time I saw it. And based on that volunteerism and what they dropped from the barges, there's at least 2 million tires down there, but estimates are probably much over that. The location of the Osborne Tire Reef is about 1.5 miles north of Port Everglades, 1 mile off the beach of Fort Lauderdale. If you're familiar with the reef tracks, there's 3 that run north and south parallel to the coast, and it's in between the 2nd and 3rd. And it's a really pretty area otherwise, but the tires are kind of a blight on the inset map that I have here. You can see a small yellow rectangle labeled ABCD. That is the original tire reef boundary. And later, the blue polygon around that was filmed, or was mapped by Broward County Department of Parks in about mid-2000s. That was around the time that we realized, okay, these tires are a mess. We need to get them out of here. NOAA granted the first small project to do some removal, just to kind of see what it was going to take, what was involved. And that's around the time that Broward was mapping the extent. And as you saw on the map, it was 10, 20 times larger than where they originally dropped them. And then in 07, 08, and 09, primarily with Army Corps, Their divers need to do a certain amount of training every year. They came out here and removed about 72,000 tires over those 3 years. And then in 2015, Rocco was awarded the contract to remove them with commercial divers. And to date, they're at about, I don't know, well, these numbers are from last year, so it's probably another, 20,000. So, but about 350,000 tires have been removed. That's a drop in the 2 million bucket. The cost is somewhere between $17 and $70 per tire to remove these, millions of tires. But DEP is trying to come up with an alternative. What can we do to remove a lot of them quicker? And to understand what's there, to do that, they needed to assess what else is there and where are the tires currently. To start it off, we used a multi-beam, and we ran parallel transects within the region of the original tire reef with a 300-meter buffer. And as we were recording that, we realized that a 300-meter buffer wasn't even close to where the tires ended. So we had to extend all of those survey lines, which are the white parts of the lines in the image. And that allowed us to basically find the northern end and southern end of the tires. And this is really important because multi-beam was able to find the larger features, hard bottom, and other artificial reefs that are down there, which provided us a framework. You can see on this image, those are a couple of barges that were intentionally sunk as artificial reefs, as well as just culverts and lots of concrete that were also put down, which, by the way, are performing much better than the tires did. So moving from the multi-beam to side scan, which was simultaneously recorded, we were able to discern tires. You can see all these little Cheerios. Those are all tires. And when you zoom in on that image, you can see that the bundles, which is where all the multitude of arrows, they bundled the motorcycle tires and put concrete inside of them to kind of hold them together better. So those have held up a lot more than the other things did. But then we can see that there's like a concrete pipe in the center, and to your right in the image, the concrete jacks were another artificial reef style. They're an intertwined jack shape. You can see a few off in south of it. This is oriented north to south, of course. And when our divers surveyed, you can see how much artificial reef structure those have provided, in contrast to the tires with nothing growing on them. After that, we did towed video surveys to give us a general layout of the area. We identified where all the tires were well outside of the original boundaries, and that provided our divers a lot of guidance when they got in. Okay, here's what you're going to be seeing, and in dive planning, it was very important. So we took all those data, and our GIS department created a map for us to ground truth. So divers were deployed with an underwater GPS and maps, one of which is here is the overview. And we went to all the green boxes to determine what they were for ground truthing. In some places, we did quadrat assessments to determine density, and then that was interpolated onto the map as well. We used our underwater GPS. This is one of my favorite fun things to do, is mapping where the tires ended up. We're able to put all the maps that we created inside the machine, so I can see them on the screen underwater while I'm navigating. So we can go from one to the next. And then we're also able to make notes inside and obviously collect new targets on points of interest. This is a quick image of what the display is. It has a compass in the right and some of the sites that we were going to. It gives you navigation to where you're headed and all that kind of stuff. So it's very important in conducting a thorough ground truthing with the divers. Our final products all got integrated into a large scale GIS, and we produced habitat maps. And the reef habitat there is all in yellow. And you can see that's the trough in between the second and third reef in the image. And then all of the different debris, old artificial reefs, junk, all kinds. There's reef balls, there's reef tubes, I mean, everyone's tried all kinds of different artificial reefs, and every one that I saw, aside from the tires, is performing much better. So it really drove the point home that these tires aren't functioning anywhere near what the concrete and other artificial reefs that we've been using with great success have been. So basically, starting with the geophysical to allow the extent to be understood, and then surveying in the water, quantifying how many tires are there to estimate for the whole area, and creating this large GIS data set for DEP whenever they determine, okay, we're going to go out here and use something to harvest a ton of these tires out. Here's what you're not going to get snagged on and all that kind of stuff. So we really put together a great map for them to take forward for the next iteration. And I'm done. I'd like to take questions. I do have a video at the end of the presentation. I'm going to go ahead and play that now, and we'll see how we're going to answer questions.
And I'd like to welcome Amelia Castelli. She's with U.S. Customs and Border Protection. She's been with there for over 15 years. And the floor is yours, Amelia. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Like Keith said, my name is Amelia Castelli. I'm with U.S. Customs and Border Protection, representing the Miami and Tampa field office. So our agency, and specifically our field office, has partnered with counties around the state of Florida to donate seized vessels to be converted into artificial reefs throughout the state. Most recently, we donated the sailboat Dylan to Okaloosa County, which is our first partnership with a county in the Panhandle. But prior to that, we've made a few donations to counties on the east coast of Florida. We've donated the Ana Cecilia, the Philomena, and the Boise Bernadette, which were all freighters. We've partnered with Palm Beach County, St. Lucie County, and Volusia County. So frequently, unfortunately, our agency intercepts vessels that are being used in an attempted efforts to smuggle hard narcotics into the United States. When our CBP officers find these freighters loaded with these narcotics, they seize the vessel, and ultimately the vessels are forfeited over to the U.S. government. Once that happens, the typical route that these would take would be to be sold at auction. But the risk there is that these vessels sometimes end up back in the hands of criminal enterprises. So this partnership with these counties is really a win-win. We're able to donate this freighter that might not be otherwise an option for the county to procure. For a good cause for the marine life, and we removed this asset from the possibility of being used again for criminal activity. So we just wanted to be here today to get this message out to counties throughout the state that we are here, and there are possibilities to partner in the future. And I will be sharing my contact information, and I am open to any questions you may have. There's also been a lot of media covering the sinkings that have occurred with the vessels that we've transferred. So I encourage you to also explore that online as well.
I'm very pleased to introduce Lance Roddy and Paul Hiones with the NOAA Office of Coast Survey. They are connecting today from Silver Spring, Maryland, and they've been with NOAA for 15 and 11 years, respectively. Welcome, gentlemen, and take it away.
Greetings, fellow participants in the 2020 Florida Artificial Reef Summit. My name is Lance Roddy. My colleague Paul Gionis and I are senior cartographers in the Nautical Data Branch of the Marine Chart Division of NOAA's Coast Survey. Paul and I thank the Reef Summit organizers for the opportunity to give this presentation pertaining to the nautical charting of artificial reefs. What is Coast Survey's mission? For 95,000 miles of shoreline and 3.4 million square nautical miles of waters, we are a congressionally mandated service that promotes navigational safety and commerce for the nation's marine highways, contributes to the national economy and environmental protection, and creates and maintains in excess of 1,000 nautical charts and 10 coast pilot volumes. This map shows the extent of Coast Survey's chart coverage in dark green, for which we are responsible for charting artificial reefs and aquaculture sites. Any proposed or active reef sites within those areas are subject to being examined by our branch, and we will provide feedback to you if we identify a problem or issue. The Marine Chart Division Fish Haven Artificial Reef Charting Policy follows. Corps of Engineer permits issued by the Corps of Engineers are the sole source for classifying obstructions as artificial reefs or fish havens on nautical charts. When the cartographer applies the fish haven to the chart, that cartographer will delete the soundings within the fish haven deeper than the authorized or permitted minimum depth. The cartographer will also delete all charted details within the fish haven except features of less or unknown depths, submerged cables, pipelines, and wells, and fish havens less than or equal to 20 meters or 66 feet will be charted with a dotted limiting line, blue tint, and an authorized minimum clearance. Fish haven symbology on our charts. These symbols are associated with our depiction of fish havens on the traditional paper charts and raster navigational charts. You can see the label, which indicates the authorized or permitted clearance. Now that the NOAA Electronic Navigational Chart, or ENC, is the primary navigational product, you need to familiarize yourself with the ENCs, which depict fish havens without a label, but the symbol includes attributes that describe the fish haven, as in this example that shows an obstruction object or symbol, with attribution indicating that it's a fish haven, and also indicates that there is a 27.4 meter clearance, which has been converted from the measurement clearance stated in the Corps of Engineer permit. There's essential information that the National Ocean Service requires to chart fish havens and artificial reefs. The Corps of Engineer permit is the foundation. Next, we need accurate geographic coordinates in NAD 83 datum or some other explicitly stated datum. For dimensions, we need a well-defined polygon or point with a radius for a circle. We need one authorized minimum clearance for each distinct reef boundary. There should be no conflict with charted features such as safety zones or regulated navigation areas. And we need deployment notification, which results in the symbol at the bottom of the screen that you see that you're accustomed to seeing on the raster and traditional paper charts. Given our transition to an ENC as the primary navigational product, the symbol for a fish haven is shown below. At this time, I will transition the presentation to my colleague, Paul Guionis.
Thank you, Lance. Hi, everyone. Because we are limited with our time to present this year, instead of delving into our administrative processes with regard to artificial reefs, I'm just going to dive right in, continuing with the charting requirements, including potential charting issues and conflicts, some reef layout scheming recommendations with a focus on charting, of course, and the impacts of inaccurate and/or incomplete permitting and as-built information. The Nautical Data Branch, NOAA, reviews public notices and permits for nautical charting purposes. So what are the nautical charting aspects that we consider when evaluating public notices and permits? With safe and efficient navigation in mind, NDB examines artificial reef public notices and permits for the following. Accurate geographic coordinates in North American Datum 83, abbreviated as NAD 83. Degrees, minutes, seconds format is our preference, but not required. For polygonal reefs, that is square, rectangle, triangle, pentagonal, etc., include all corner points. For circular reefs, include a center point with a radius. Please also include statement of coordinate system in a horizontal datum. That usually is, for example, latitude, longitude, NAD 83. We also require one fixed authorized minimum clearance with stated tidal datum for each permitted reef. Examples of tidal datums include mean low water or mean lower low water. And for split or banded fish havens, we require one fixed authorized minimum clearance for each distinct set of reef boundaries. Please note that if there are any issues with any of the aforementioned items, expect an email or a phone call from someone in NDB,
most likely myself, to clear up any problems. And if the errors are in the permit, we will be requesting a permit modification from the Corps of Engineers. When stating the authorized minimum clearance with the stated title datum in the public notice or permit, please avoid ambiguous clearance statements like this one. It reads, between 12 and 60 feet of water depth requires a 50% of water depth mean low water clearance, and anything greater than 60 feet water depth requires a 50-foot clearance. This nebulous statement makes charting the clearance of this reef nearly impossible, and if we were able to chart that somehow, it would be difficult for the mariner to calculate this data on the fly, particularly when they have so many other factors to consider while navigating the vessel. Instead, let's provide a concise clearance statement that includes one definitive single numerical value, just like how this particular artificial reef was corrected to read. A minimum clearance of 50 feet from the top of the deployed material relative to mean low water shall be maintained. We don't recommend permitting large artificial reefs because that causes a loss of hydrographic detail that is important to the mariner. But if you're looking into bringing a large artificial reef that stretches along a vast swath of water to fruition, we would highly suggest to split or bend, if you will, the fish haven into two or more parts so that a broad disparity of depths across the water column can be accommodated. If you do decide to split or bend the fish haven like this, please be sure to provide one definitive authorized minimum clearance for each part denoted by a set of coordinates. We have here one example of an initial reef proposal that had a few conflicts. First off, it's a proposal for a very large fish haven, and it had a proposed authorized minimum clearance of 7.5 feet, which if charted would take a lot of navigable waters away from the vessels with deeper drafts. Second, the proposed fish haven impinged upon two anchorages in the south and southeast corner there. And of course, you can't have that. So we worked with all involved stakeholders and were able to get agreement between all parties to band the fish haven into three distinct parts, each with their own clearances of 7 feet in the western portion, 40 feet within the central portion, and 60 feet in the eastern portion of the fish haven. Also, all parties agreed that it wasn't a good idea to have the fish haven encroach on the two anchorages. So in the end, the artificial reef was pulled away from those two anchorages in the south. This is just one example of why it's important to get issues squared away from the get-go. When it comes to the charting of artificial reefs, there are many impacts of inaccurate and/or incomplete information. Like we saw on the previous slides, for example, the charting of reefs may conflict with previously depicted information, such as an anchorage or a restricted area, pipelines, cables, or other features. Also, if a fish haven is established in a particular area, its existence may deny deep draft vessels access to ports in federally maintained channels, safety fairways, and/or ferry routes. Additionally, inaccurate and incomplete information will also sooner or later become an inconvenience for all involved parties, costing all stakeholders time and money. Moreover, changing or removing charts is a long, arduous, and costly process. So please, let's try to save ourselves the hassle and the aggravation by providing accurate information from the start. We just wanted to let you know one more thing, give you a heads up before we go. We wanted to give everyone a heads up about our new policy with regard to the sunsetting of raster charts. We have started the process of winding down the production of all traditional NOAA paper nautical charts, and production will officially cease by January 2025. According to the Office of Coast Survey, there are three major components of the sunset effort. One, improve the consistency and level of detail provided by NOAA's primary chart product, the electronic navigational chart. Two, promote use of paper chart products based on ENC data, either through the NOAA Custom Chart web app being developed by NOAA, or through third-party commercial providers selling ENC-based chart products. And finally, the orderly shutdown of all traditional NOAA paper and other raster nautical chart production. For more information, refer to the following web address: nauticalcharts.noaa.gov/publication/docs/raster-sunset.pdf, and we will provide that link to you in the chat. And that concludes our presentations. If you have any questions, Lance and I would be happy to answer them in the question and answer session. Thanks.
Hi, I'm honored to present Lisa Lovern. She is the Senior Project Manager with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and she is coming to us from Panama City. Take it away, Lisa.
Thank you for having me here to discuss federal permitting of artificial reefs. I'm with the Jacksonville District. I've been there for 12 years, so I have a little bit of experience with artificial reef permitting. The objectives today are to discuss Corps' authority, why are we involved, liability, the Corps' application process, permit considerations to include Reef Design and Endangered Species Act, permit special conditions, and finally compliance and enforcement. So why is the Corps involved? We are involved for two reasons, for two acts. The Rivers and Arbors Act, which gives us Section 10 jurisdictional authority out to 200 nautical miles. We also have authority under the Clean Water Act under Section 404, which extends out to 3 nautical miles off the coast of Florida and the inland waterways. Usually you have to get a state permit as well as a Corps permit. However, if you're outside of the state permit jurisdiction, which is 9 nautical miles, it requires coordination under the Coastal Zone Management Consistency Act. Although a state permit may not be required, CZM still may be required. That process takes about 60 days, but that can run concurrently with the Corps permitting process. For liability, applicants are usually government agencies because of financial and insurance liability. Generally, they claim sovereign immunity or state that they are self-insured. So we want to get the ball rolling for a Corps application and ultimately a permit. So for a complete application, we need a couple of items. One is the Corps application. It's 3 pages, and most of these bullets are in the application. On statements of avoidance and minimization and a statement on compensatory mitigation, those items are needed when you're within the 3 nautical miles from the coast or inland waterways, because those are regulated under the Clean Water Act, Section 404. In addition to the application, and make sure to sign it, but in addition to it, we also need drawings. We need a location, vicinity map. We also need a site plan. We also need a cross-section view. One other thing that we need for an application for an artificial reef is we need some charting information specifically for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. We'll talk about that in a moment. Anyone that knows artificial reefs or involved with artificial reefs knows the National Artificial Reef Plan. This is a Bible for artificial reefs. It gives you great guidelines for siting, construction, development. It suggests coordination with state and federal stakeholders. It also addresses artificial reef material criteria. And there's a great document that needs to be sitting right next to this document at your desk, is the Guidelines for Marine Artificial Reef Material. We'll see that in a moment. Siting is very important for artificial reefs. You need to consider the objectives for your reef. Are you doing it just for recreation, or are you actually trying to bring in a certain type of fish? It needs to prevent unreasonable obstructions to navigation. Minimum depth, as a rule, the clearance needs to be 2 times the height of the structure measured from the top of the structure to the mean low water. We want to minimize user conflicts, and finally, we want to protect existing resources. We don't want to put a reef on top of an existing reef. That specific information for NOAA charting, once you receive your permit from the Corps, you're going to want to include the Corps permit number. You're also going to want to include the accurate geographic coordinates for your site at all corners. We want to have the dimensions. You want to have a polygon or a point of radius. We want 1 authorized minimum clearance. In addition, we are looking at no conflicts with other users. And as you move through your permit and your deployments, you're going to be turning those in and notifying NOAA with those deployments. This is the document I mentioned a minute ago about the marine artificial reef materials. These are tried and true materials. They've been known to work and be successful. So the material criteria, so it needs to function. You need to be able to stimulate your growth. You need the compatibility. You don't want to, you want to minimize your risk and the user conflicts. You want the materials to be stable. You want them to be there for a long time, and also you want them to be durable. We don't want them to deteriorate. There's many more material requirements, but these are some that I just pulled out. Just to note, we want to make sure that those materials weigh at least 500 pounds. We want them clean, no asphalt, no petroleum, no free-floating materials. Again, we want it to be stable within a 20-year storm event, as us in the Panhandle noted from Michael, and of course across the state with all the hurricanes. We want to design, select, and deploy to avoid entrapping marine life. And then finally, if there are other materials that you want to use, then we can entertain that through the public notice process. I always like to put this slide in because we've learned a lot over the years, what works, what doesn't work. These are a couple of examples that do not work. As stated a moment ago, we have a public notice process for artificial reef permitting. This allows the public to look up the information and to be able to comment, or if they have any concerns, they are able to submit those into us during the permitting process. We also not only notify the public, but we also notify our agencies, our sister agencies. We work with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the National Marine Fisheries Service for the Endangered Species Act. We also look at historic and cultural resources, so we work with the State Historic Preservation Office along with the federally recognized tribes. Of course, navigation is a big issue, so we work with the Coast Guard. And depending on where your reef is, we might need to coordinate with port authorities, military bases, and of course, non-governmental organizations. Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act. So for every activity in which a federal action is involved, each federal agency carrying out the action, in this case, the Corps, is required to evaluate those effects of each proposed action on any federally listed threatened or endangered species or its designated critical habitat. As stated before, we work with the Fish and Wildlife Service. They have a lot of species under their purview. The one you want to note on this particular slide is the manatee. We do have programmatic keys where we're able to work through those and do a programmatic consultation. We also work with the National Marine Fisheries Service. They have lots of species under their purview as well, specifically small-tooth sawfish, swimming sea turtles, sturgeon species, and any designated critical habitat. The Corps has worked with the National Marine Fisheries Service for a programmatic biological opinion. This is an expedited consultation method. We call it JAXPO. So JAXPO addresses consultation for in-water work authorized by all types of Corps permits that meet the applicable project design criteria, and there's 10 activities that JAXPO covers. If you utilize those PDCs to comply with ESA, and we can ultimately get the agencies not likely to adversely affect determination. The good thing about JAXPO is it does include artificial reefs. So it is included under Activity 7. So the project design criteria for artificial reefs, we have 11 PDCs that apply to all in-water work. Example of that is to work during daylight hours. But we also have specific ones for on-site personnel looking for species, reporting if those species are interacted with. And then we have specific requirements for operation of the construction equipment, and then of course, turbidity. So this is a lot of words. So moving into now we've gone through public notice, and now we're looking at the consultations, and now we're looking at actually writing up the permit. So we have special conditions that the Corps puts in permits. And so for the use of JAXPO, just to let you know, these pretty much mimic what the Corps already has for the Jacksonville district for our standard conditions. So these are pretty much synonymous with what we have. So speaking of the Corps' permit conditions, we have the initial agency notification that goes to NOAA as well as the Coast Guard. Our artificial reef materials we've already worked through. We have pre and post deployment notifications, so we ensure that the deployments were where they were supposed to be. We have ESA special conditions for right whale, sea turtles. And so finally, talking about compliance and enforcement. So we want to ensure those deployments are within the project boundaries. And any missed deployments, they need to be charted. I know there's a little bit of trepidation on saying anything about that, but we need to get that in there and charted. And then lastly, under Section 404 of the Clean Water Act, we can issue administrative penalties for violations. It's not a common occurrence. And just in summary, work with the Corps. We're here to help you in getting a permit. These are just some of these. We want to make sure that the siding is vital, the materials are good. If you go by Jaxpo and follow those PDCs, it's a quicker process. And then finally, we definitely need to provide NOAA a copy of the permit. So lastly, for Jacksonville District, which I work in, we have 10 offices around the state. Depending on where your artificial reef is located, it's going to depend on who you turn in your application to. Lastly, just a couple of information slides for those documents that are referenced in my presentation. I want to thank you for having me here to talk about federal permitting of artificial reefs, and I'll be glad to answer any questions during the Q&A session. Thank you.
Wow, that was a great series of presentations. My name is Ken Smith. I work with FWC in our marine and estuarine subsection. We do marine and estuarine habitat restoration and work very closely with the artificial reef program here at FWC and in the counties, mostly looking at kind of the ecologically relevant artificial reefs, looking for connectivity between adults and juvenile habitats, for instance. And Christine is also going to be co-moderating today with me in the next 15 minutes or so. Just wanted to note that we have a hard stop at 9:10 because we don't have a break, and we're going to go right into the next series of presentations. But I'd like to thank all of our presenters right off the bat. You all did a terrific job there, very detail-rich presentations, and I really appreciate that. Right off the bat, though, we're going to take questions from the folks that saw these presentations today, from everybody on here. But I did want to extend an invitation to Bill Siemens to actually answer one of the questions that he posed relative to the word artificial. And you mentioned, Bill, when do artificial reefs stop becoming artificial? And I thought we had a little bit of time here. If you'd like to expand on that a little bit, that'd be great.
Well, thank you, Kent. I guess I asked the question because I don't know how to answer it. We've heard for so long, or I should say we're in the last decade in the literature, we increasingly hear the word mimic. And we talk about, I'm calling them human-made reefs, mimicking natural reefs in some particular fashion. It could be over a number of ecosystem functions, or it could be one specific. In my remarks a few minutes ago, I talked about ecosystem services provided by human-made reefs. And you get into that literature, which has been emerging over the last 15 years. It started with the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment Program of the United Nations some time ago. And you know, as a lot of us are biologists and engineers, and we're familiar with some of the provisioning services of ecosystems, such as food, but there are also cultural aspects. So, you know, at an extreme example, you could say a work of art installed in an underwater museum, such as in the Panhandle or in Cancun, Mexico, is sort of a natural structure because it's fulfilling one very specific ecosystem service. I guess I asked the question to maybe promote some discussion from the people who really know how to answer the question in terms of the ecological structure and function of reefs we're putting in the water, not just at a fish level, but at microbial level, an invertebrate level, for example. So that's a long-winded, non-specific answer, but I just hope to stir the pot a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, very thoughtful considerations, Bill, and it is something relative to that connectivity in habitat context that's important to the work that is being done here. Christine, oh, I wanted to reiterate what Christine put out on the chat there. If everybody who presented, Chip, Victor, Amelia, if you would please turn on both your video and your microphones, we can hear you if people have specific questions. But let me turn to Christine. Christine, do we have any questions from the audience?
So we did have a few questions that came in during the presentations. The first one, I guess, Chip, that I had for you was, how do you use the monitoring or the mapping to prioritize which areas of the tires are to be removed first? Since, over the past 10 years, or 15 years, we've only made a dent in that 2 million tire estimate.
Well, the idea is that we'll be able to identify where the densest piles of tires are, so that any other mechanical methods like some kind of dredging or, a drag can go through and focus on areas that aren't going to impact the reef while still removing all the tires that are necessary. And, maximize that effort in the places where you can spend a short amount of time and get the most tires. That's pretty much what the idea there was.
Okay, excellent. Any others, Christine?
Yeah, so for Victor, how are you coordinating getting your divers to the monitoring sites to conduct the research?
Well, as I mentioned during the presentation, we received funding through different partners. And basically the funding is to cover the cost to go offshore. And that means to rent a boat, or to pay for the gas. If some of the volunteers, they bring their own boats, so we pay for their gas. So we have a schedule we set different, we schedule different dives during the spring and summer time. And we go, we set groups of 3 divers per boat, at least 3 divers, sometimes 4 divers per boat. And in each session, each group will go into 2 reef sites to collect data. So if we have 2 different groups, we can get data of 4 different reef patches at the same time, which is our goal. And our main objective is to collect data at least twice during the year in each of the reef sites. So that the ways we have a roster of divers, and we plan in advance. The only way we cancel is weather dependent. This year that happened, and with pandemic, it was really difficult to get people in the boat and go out to dive. But that's exactly why now we got the underwater drone, which we expect to start using now during fall and winter time.
Victor?
Yep.
Victor, Hayward Matthews here. Back in the middle 70s, we did the first artificial reefs in Taylor County. We actually used some big old skidder tires, bundled together these great big tires the paper company wanted to get rid of. Are those still out there? Have you all done any of those surveys of those skidder tires that we put out long time ago?
No, unfortunately, no, Dr. Matthew. We have been focused our monitoring efforts in Boca Reef. We still have the Andrew Reef, which Dr. Seaman was mentioning at the beginning of his presentation. But no, we haven't checked on those tires, but that would be interesting to see if they're still out there.
Yeah, I know we have some tires deployed right off of St. Mark's that we've had some recent monitoring by FSU do. So it'd be interesting to see their results. I have seen some growth on them, but it is minimal compared to the other artificial reef material that's out there. Luckily, these are kind of attached through like cables and stuff and still together rather than spread out so much that we've seen in Fort Lauderdale. Another question just came in for Lisa. It's more of a specific question about the Jaxbow. There might be a typo in the actual like maximum size that you can request underneath the Jaxbow. I guess it states 40 acres or a quarter nautical mile, but that doesn't, I guess there's some miscalculation there. Can you explain which one is correct and what people should be following?
You're unmuted. I'm sorry, you're muted, Lisa. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. So that question has been brought to our attention, and currently they're just deferring to the 40 acres, but that question has been pushed up to the NIMS and core team that developed Jaxbow. So when they go back and probably revise it to, there's a couple of items within the whole entire biological opinion that they need to address. So I'm not sure when they're going to go back and look at it to do any type of revisions, but it has been pushed up to the team.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. And then just had a quick question. Over the past 5 years, what can you say has been the most challenging for people to get permits or to permit?
Well, for me, during my time of permitting, really it's gone relatively smooth as long as there's, it's sited not where it's got hard bottom and things like that. That's the biggest hurdle. The one thing that I can recall as of late was with Bay County. They had a small artificial reef. They had a series of these areas. And as I said earlier, we have to look at all different kinds of laws and regulations. So one of those happens to be the historic and cultural resources. And when we pushed that up through the public notice for these SAR sites, the State Historic Preservation Office came back and they had some data that they thought that there was something out there. So underwater cultural survey would probably be a hurdle for the applicant. And I know for Bay County, they did a lot of coordination with our local FSU. They have a underwater criminal program. So they were able to utilize them. But I think that would have been the biggest challenge probably in the last 10 years that I've personally seen.
Thanks, Lisa. And I did want to say too, I just wanted to give a shout out to the Corps. The Corps is a great partner in conservation. They keep us on the straight and narrow. And we work extensively with Lisa in her region on doing a lot of our habitat restoration work. So again, thank you, Lisa. Those details are great. I did want to ask one question of Amelia Castelli, if possible. I wanted to see if you knew of any major issues with private ownership rights relative to the donated forfeited vessels. Is there anything that counties potentially would need to be wary of with those?
No, none at all. We deal with the owners or any other parties that might have an interest in the vessel on our end. So once we get to the point of donating or transferring a vessel to a county, we're usually at the point where the vessel has already been forfeited to the government, so it's now government property. And if a party that had interest in that vessel has any other claim, they would work through us, and it would really be based on the value of that vessel. But the counties have nothing to worry about once it's transferred to them.
Wonderful. Okay, excellent. Thank you. I also had a question I wanted to pose here for Lance and Paul. As you all know, we're experiencing much more intense and more frequent hurricanes, major tropical storms. And despite our best efforts with many of the materials that are being placed in offshore as artificial reefs, and even inshore for that matter, some of those reef systems are actually moving a bit once they've been put down. How does NOS actually maintain specific artificial reef location data given these observed movements over time? Lance, I know you've got your speaker muted.
So thanks for the question. Well, we're reliant on the permittee to be able to report these kind of issues to us. So if there is a shift of materials outside of the permitted area, I would think that one step would be to contact the Corps of Engineers and determine whether or not there's a modification is required in order to perhaps expand the reef area, unless perhaps there's some intent to relocate some of that reef material back into the originally permitted area. So we are, to a large extent, dependent upon the permittees and coordinating with them. Also, another way is that if a NOAA hydrographic survey vessel or a contractor that's doing a survey for NOAA or National Ocean Service, if they're doing a survey in that area and they detect some type of material outside of a permitted area, then they will, depending on the depth or the clearance, they may report that to us, to the Marine Chart Division, as a danger to navigation submission. And then we could publish that to our electronic navigational chart quickly, and it would also be published in a local notice to mariners relatively quickly. So those are basically the two ways. We're dependent upon, once again, in some, the permittees to be able to let us know about what's going on and how are they going to deal with it from the regulatory perspective, as well as those instances for which there may be a survey that's not necessarily designed to go out and check for this kind of thing, but it's simply detecting it by virtue of the fact that they are actually assigned a particular area to survey in.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you,
And
Lance.
if I may add, if I may interrupt, we also receive a lot of post-deployment notification and reports that from various permittees, and we will also analyze those. And if we find anything that's anomalous within those deployment reports, we will go ahead and confirm placement and depth with the permittee, and we will chart maybe an obstruction based on that information as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul and Lance. Great responses. I really appreciate that. And thank you very much for the work that you do to keep our mariners safe and, these areas accessible to the public. Christine, I know we've got a bunch of questions that have come in. So if you'd like to.
Yeah, I think we're out of time. We got to run into the next session, but please, speakers, feel free to answer any questions that are left in the chat. You can also message the speakers individually and they can get back to you when they have a moment. But our next session is going to start right now. So just stick in this Zoom session and we will learn a little bit more about mitigation.
Thanks to our speakers again.
It's my pleasure to introduce Karen Holloway-Atkins from East Coast Biologists and David Snyder from CSA Ocean Sciences. They both have been working in this area for over 25 years, and they're connecting to us today from their respective homes in Indy Atlantic and Stuart, Florida. Welcome, both of you. Take it away.
All right, thank you. We've got a lot to cover and a little time to do it in. So David Schneider and I will present you with a brief background of the design and deployment of the Brevard County mitigation reefs. And we'll focus the rest of our time on some of our early findings of what's growing on these reefs, who seems to be taking up residence and or spending some time hanging around. So through agency permitting requirements, it was determined that artificial reefs would be installed to offset the impacts to nearshore hard bottom reefs during the Brevard County Beach Restoration Project of the Mid-Reach. Acreage determined to be required was 4.8 acres based on the model distribution of sand, estimated total fill over mapped hard bottom, and reefs were to be installed 1 to 2 years prior to beach nourishment activities. So one of the primary problems of mitigating for hard bottom reefs such as these is not being able to feasibly construct reefs in the nearshore environment. So from an engineering standpoint, challenges were construction materials and design, picking the right ones for this area, balancing your liability and trying to still get as shallow as possible for the construction of the reef, and then supporting these reefs because there's no hard bottom below the sand here, and ultimately getting an effective footprint. So as well as the structural and site challenges from a biological standpoint, Artificial reefs need to mimic as many functions of the natural hard bottom reef that can be determined from early biological assessments and surveys, and specifically what features were going to help enhance the probability of settlement or recruitment, attracting major local foundation species, such as the algal species previously identified in foraging studies for juvenile green turtles, and Phragmatopoma lapidosa, the sabulary worm that colonizes hard bottom, and they're a prominent feature of the natural reefs here. They're responsible in part for the diversity of fishes and invertebrates in this area. So some pilot studies were conducted on some settlement plate and experiments, some seabed elevation, and a deployment of prototype just to try to investigate some of these questions. Ultimately, the design and the construction of the artificial reefs was a network of 10 sites, each of them 3 to 4 sets. And these sets actually ended up being 36 total individual reefs. They have about 60 feet of sand between them. And then each of the sets are made up of these articulated concrete mats. Mats are 18 interlocking blocks with coquina stones embedded in the surface. We had a ledge feature that was constructed on the west-facing edge of each site to mimic the narrow hard bottom relief of the natural reef and provide refuge for sea turtles and fishes. Those coquina stones that were inlaid were to provide a natural attachment surface for epibiota. The reef construction began in 2017, was supposed to run 2 years. Hurricane Irma kind of put a little setback on that, and so the reefs were not completed until early June of 2019.
Thanks, Karen, for setting the stage here. I think it's important for the audience to understand sort of the preliminary thought and testing that went into designing these reefs. And I'm now going to give you a brief description of our findings with respect to fish and epibiota that have colonized these reefs to date. Our methods for epibiota are quantitative photography. For fishes, we're using aided video cameras. And we're also compiling lists of modal invertebrates, other epibiota and fishes for overall biodiversity comparisons. We're sampling of the 10 sites Karen mentioned, we're sampling at 5 of them up and down the coast, numbers 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. I've listed in the slide here the number of months that these different reefs were in the water prior to sampling, which those times range from 10 to 24 months. I'd just like to show you a few vignettes of the sort of what the reefs look like and some of the conspicuous biota. Here's an example, white and gray tunicates, got orange boring sponges, the yellow sea whip and its little associated gastropod there, Siphoma, that actually feeds on it. Sea urchins, Arbacea, were common at a couple of the sites. We saw aggregations of things like dog whelks, and at each of these aggregations, we noted eggs were being laid onto the substrate. The quantitative imagery kind of painted a picture of a standard fouling assemblage that was dominated by turf algae, but included tunicates, macroalgae, and sponges, and other elements of the substrate. These are what the data look like from our first sampling event. See, turf pretty much dominated the cover in terms of these samples, followed by tunicates and various macroalgae. For fishes, we recorded overall 29 species from 18 families. This included some common things like sheep's head and spadefish and bigfish, and some other interesting taxa like striped croakers, moray eels, flounders, and even some subadult Goliath groupers. for our baited cameras sets, hairy blenny, sheep's head, spadefish, pigfish, and various jacks, yellow jacks, Jack Crevalle were common in the samples. Here's an image of the of fish congregating at the inshore facing ledge that Karen mentioned earlier that we had designed into the reefs. And I just wanted to illustrate or show this to illustrate that some of these species that are present as adults probably were drawn in from the adjacent natural hard bottom, like the sheep's head and the black margates. But we had evidence of a number of things colonizing, settling directly from the plankton, including tomtates, lane snapper, sailor's choice, spot fin butterfly fish, hairy blennies, sergeant majors, and northern sennets we all saw as early juveniles. So we hope to take these data and in the near future compare them with similarly collected data from the adjacent nearshore habitats to try to understand how well these reefs are replicating the ecological functions of the natural reef.
All right, thank you, David. So the last portion of our talk concerns sea turtle monitoring surveys for the mitigation reefs. So these surveys that actually began during the construction of the artificial reefs, and then we've conducted post-construction year 1 and just recently year 2. So surveys are conducted in the waters adjacent to mid-reach and include a previously designated reference area adjacent Patrick Air Force Base. Transects are 14.65 kilometers in length, and one survey day would consist of doing a nearshore shallow transect and a deeper offshore transect that actually runs through the mitigation reef sites. During the surveys, observers record the location of sea turtles sightings, the species of turtle that they see, life stage, and some other activity and pertinent data for the observation. So results of surveys indicate that, yes, we have the presence of juvenile green turtles and subadult loggerheads over the artificial reefs. And in addition, we are seeing some adult turtles observed in and around the reefs. So while we know that juvenile and subadult turtles are likely remaining in the area, the presence of those adult turtles is likely due to mating and nesting activities that occur in summer during this off this adjacent beach. So some of our future monitoring will entail year-to-year abundance and distribution comparisons on the mitigation reef turtles and presence, and then the diversity and abundance comparison between the nearshore hard bottom reefs and the mitigation reef site population of turtles. And in a separate study that we just recently started, we are using the passive acoustic network, which is the FACT array, the Florida Acoustic Coastal Telemetry Array, to study juvenile green turtles and possibly find out how they're resting or using these areas as foraging areas, and if they're actually moving between the nearshore hard bottom and mitigation reefs in the two different habitat types present in the mid-reach. So with that, I'd like to acknowledge people who have supported this project and been active participants in helping us. Thank you.
And I'd like to introduce Eric Nygaard. He is with Port Everglades. He's been there for 4 years, but he's been a diver off of Southeast Florida for the past 40 years. We look forward to your presentation, Eric. Take it away.
Thank you. So today I'm going to talk about the artificial reef and mitigation reef programs at Port Everglades. Port Everglades officially opened in 1928. When it opened, almost the entire population of Broward County came out for the celebration. Today, pre-COVID, we are the #1 seaport in Florida by petroleum storage and by revenue, containers, and exports, and we're the #3 seaport in the world for cruise passengers. This slide shows some of the areas around us. Most notably, in the top right, you'll see our anchorage, our artificial reef area, and where we are located in relationship to Broward County and Fort Lauderdale. You see the airport to the southwest of us as well. We've been involved with the artificial reef program since 1981 when the Port Everglades Artificial Reef Area was created. Since then, there have been at least 10 deployments at greater than 140 feet. We've also been involved in several of the vessels that have been deployed off of Broward County. They're listed here on the slide. We are also involved in the removal of the 2 million tires that were deployed as the Osborne Artificial Reef off of Fort Lauderdale. They're collected offshore, they're brought into the port. We have dumpsters that they're put into, and then they're properly disposed of. On this slide, I also want to note on the bottom left-hand corner is the Traycore Dry Dock. That is an artificial reef that I'll be talking about in the next couple slides. So this photo shows the dry dock. It's in the center part of the photo, 1981 pre-deployment. And why this is important is it shows, very interesting, how this ship aligns with our LiDAR coverage. This is basically laser coverage of the bottom bathymetry down at 220 feet. And you can see the dry dock there in the center. When I overlay the aerial photograph, it comes out perfectly. One of the reasons we did this is with one of our projects where we had contemplated placing the dredged material offshore off the 200-foot drop. We were looking at the artificial reef material that was out there and potential impacts to it. That alternative is no longer being considered, but we needed to know exactly what was down there, so we used a number of resources, including the LiDAR, to record it. We also looked at the 1991 side scan sonar information that was available from the Environmental Protection Growth Management Department of Broward County. We scanned those Mylar sheets, we georeferenced them, and we were quite amazed at how accurate they were, because that was pre-GPS that data was collected. You can see here the location of the Traycore dry dock on the LiDAR, as well as with the side scan sonar imagery. So we have a number of projects at the port that involve corals and artificial reefs, mitigation reefs to be more specific. With our slip 2 expansion, we had to extend it 225 feet to the west in 2018. There were 45 corals greater than 10 centimeters that had to be relocated. We relocated them out to the Memphis Reef Ball Array Quad 2. We had a few other corals that we added, corals of opportunities. You can see here on this top graphic the location of Quad 2. It's almost directly due west of the Danny Beach Fishing Pier. I'm sorry, due east. It also shows here the Southport Turning Notch Mitigation Reef, which I'm going to talk about in a second. So for the Slip 2 expansion project, the corals were relocated to these reef balls. These reef balls were placed in between the second and the third reef where there's considerable current. There's also quite thick algae and cyanobacteria in this area. It's kind of a harsh environment for the corals. Also, we're learning that taking the corals from the inland environment and putting them offshore has been a little challenging. On this particular project, we ended up after the third annual monitoring port with only 16% survival. So there were a number of factors that affected the corals here. Some of them were knocked off by currents, possibly by fishermen. We don't know exactly why the corals were separated from the reef balls, but we are learning from this, and we're looking now to do most of our inland replacement or relocations inland. The Southport Turning Notch was a very large project. It's currently being constructed. We're extending it 835 feet to take on larger vessels. Received permits in 2015, 2016, commenced in 2018. It had some mangrove impacts that were also mitigated, but it also required removal of a significant amount of riprap. That riprap contained 9,713 corals. Of those, 814 were greater than 10 centimeters and needed to be relocated. It's amazing how large and healthy the corals are in this environment with the ships constantly stirring up the bottom. I mean, it's quite amazing, as you can see from these photos, the diversity and the quality of the corals in there. So we relocated the corals offshore after creating a mitigation reef consisting of 5 boulder piles, 50 feet in diameter, 12 feet high. They were placed in 35 feet of water, 1 mile offshore. 826 were relocated. Of those, 225 were monitored. One of the problems we first encountered was that there was significant parrotfish predation. This was very much unanticipated because we have the same species of parrotfish in the turning notch as we had offshore, and on an adjacent mitigation reef, there are the same species of corals that we are relocating. So because of how aggressively the corals are being predated, we spent another $90,000 to put a cage on each one of the corals. You can see a picture of one of the cages in the bottom right-hand side of the screen. The cages were obviously successful at keeping the parrotfish away, but one of the problems we had was that algae started accumulating on the cages, and we were out there regularly cleaning it every 2 to 3 months. That was also very expensive. So in July of this year, we removed the cages. We plan to send another team out there to do an inventory of the corals to see how much predation is ongoing and to assess a natural recruitment, which is starting to be quite successful. In addition to the required mitigation, a relocation, we also rescued 2,000 additional colonies of corals. The regulatory agencies and some of the research institutes felt that the corals that we have in the Southport turning notch had a higher resistance to the stony coral tissue loss disease and had an interest in working with these. So we went down, collected the corals, and we provided them to the research institutes noted on this slide. A major project we have coming up is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Deepening Project. It started in 1997. It's been ongoing for a while, obviously. We're going to deepen the outer entrance channel from 45 feet to 55 feet and widen it from 500 feet to 800 feet. This will impact approximately 40 acres of reef of hard bottom. This includes direct impacts as well as sedimentation impacts. We're still working on the details, trying to figure out exactly how many acres will be impacted and how to mitigate for it. But this has been an ongoing study. There was an EIS in 2016. In 2018, we did a ESA coral survey and a benthic community survey. These are all available for anybody who's interested. There's a link here for the EIS and some of these documents. And on my personal page, I'll have additional information on these projects. So for the deepening project mitigation, the 2015 EIS proposed 103,000 nursery coral raised corals be outplanted on 18 acres of existing natural reef, plus the addition of 5 acres of artificial or mitigation reef. We don't know yet if that's going to be boulders or prefabricated modules. We're still trying to figure out those details. But on that 5 acres, there will be 2 acres on which corals would be relocated, plus the other 3 acres will be left for natural recruitment. We have an interagency working group consisting of all of the agencies that are involved with marine resources. They're working very closely with us. We're looking at other alternatives for the mitigation, including assisted reproduction, active cleaning, algal removal, herbivore replenishment, disease intervention, and rebel stabilization. The Port is also involved with the South Florida Association of Environmental Professionals. The SFAP is trying to launch a community coral nursery. We allowed them to come in and collect corals off of our slip 2 wall after the relocation had occurred for the permit. They collected some small Oculana diffusa and they moved them to another reef ball array off of the port. They had limited success with that. The same problems we had with our relocation project they had with this relocation. There was a sergeant major that started attacking the corals as soon as they were put down, and within a few months they were broken off at the base. And so there's some very strong forces out there affecting these corals. So with that, I am open to any questions.
I'm happy to introduce Shelby Thomas and Stacy Brown. They are with the nonprofit organization 1000 Mermaids Artificial Reef Project, a gold sponsor of the Florida Artificial Reef Summit. Welcome both of you, and take it away, Shelby.
Thank you, Keith. Thanks for having us. Today we're going to be talking about our transformative artificial reef project, 1000 Mermaids. We're going to be talking about how to put the art in artificial reefs. I'm Shelby Thomas, the COO and Director of Research for the Ocean Rescue Alliance. And also presenting today, we have Stacy Brown, our CFO and Director of Education. The 1000 Mermaids Artificial Reef is an eco-art project that serves as an underwater eco-friendly destination for tourism, research, and coral restoration. 1000 Mermaids started out as an artist's vision to use the symbol of a mermaid to raise awareness to marine conservation, while creating habitat and providing a unique diving location through the placement of 1000 mermaids over time. The mermaid throughout history has served as a symbol of the human's connection to the ocean and its mystery. We find value in the ability to strengthen people's relationship to the ocean through art. Our mission is to create complex marine habitats while also providing enhanced creative, economic, and educational opportunities for the benefit, education, and enjoyment of residents, students, and visitors alike.
The Ocean Rescue Alliance is a marine conservation and restoration nonprofit that implements innovative techniques to restore marine environments. The 1000 Mermaids Artificial Reef Project was founded 4 years ago with the mission to combine public art with innovative reef development to provide essential coral restoration solutions to not only the Florida Reef Tract, but worldwide.
We are aiming to conduct sustainable restoration through incorporating these objectives. Through the creation of artificial reefs designed to incorporate art, innovative designs, and safe materials to enhance marine habitats and provide a unique diving location. Artistically crafted reefs enable every individual the opportunity to create an eternal reef for their loved one or company, creating a lasting memory on the ocean floor that will help restore our marine ecosystems. We are committed to reef restoration and are planning to actively outplant coral on our modules. Each of our unique dive sites provide an ecotourism opportunity that gives back to our local communities. Our education program seeks to empower and inspire our future generations to maintain our marine environments. Coupled with our citizen science program, the Coral Rangers, which engages our local communities in reef monitoring and coral restoration efforts. Our research investigates design improvements, fish population dynamics and recruitment, coral outplanting, and making effective restoration progress. Our goal is to spread awareness and create marine habitats for generations to come. Our marine environments are at risk of collapse, and although it is easy to identify the importance of and support reefs provide, it is hard to engage the public and shift perception to take action and ownership in conserving their marine environments. The ocean is often out of sight and out of mind for a lot of people. Just with this expansive blanket of water, and quite frequently, people may feel that their actions are too small to create an impact, which follows with both the lack of education and awareness. With the lack of relatability and personal sentiment, it is hard to create a strong connection between people, their actions, and the ocean. Our ability to connect people to the ocean is more important now more than ever. Through the use of artistic and memorial reefs, Aura aims to change the public's relationship with the ocean and our coral reefs. We believe art can empower and inspire people. Throughout history, art has been used to connect people, represent cultures, spread impactful messages, and inspire movements. Often it is difficult to communicate scientific findings and influence the public to take action. We utilize art to bring not only awareness to marine conservation, but also provide a pathway to communicate science. These are some of our existing artificial reefs. The top images are from our 1000 Mermaids Artificial Reef Project, which mermaid sculptures were created to bring awareness to marine conservation and coral restoration. These reefs enhance marine habitats, but also serve as an ecotourism attraction, which we hope will impact our local communities and continue the creation of new artificial reefs. We are working on a variety of different themed reefs that bring different cultures and communities together. As we're getting more familiar of getting pushed into a more virtual world, there is an undeniable value in its ability to reach and connect people. We utilize social media to engage the public and drive awareness to marine conservation. Social media influencers such as Emily Gugliano, known as the American Mermaid, who is a full-time mermaid who spends her time educating, hosting podcasts, and events to help promote marine conservation. Her 11-foot tall sculpture will be going out on our next deployment. We're using the latest and greatest technology to advance our design techniques with our ability to use VR and 3D scanning to create more detailed sculptures, helping us create more artistic and complex reefs. We're working to bring a virtual reality underwater world of our dive sites in the near future, so you can dive our sites from anywhere. We will use this virtual reality as an educational tool to have our users dive, learn about marine conservation, attend workshops, and much more.
In the first year of our citizen science program, Coral Rangers has taught over 700 students about artificial reefs, the issues our oceans are facing, and ways they can make an impact. 10 of our students have received their scuba certifications. Over 20 students are actively attending community events and speaking on ocean issues. And we have over 40 students involved in marine science school programming.
The most beautiful aspect of these reefs are the ability to impact people. As we know, the ocean may be out of sight and out of mind for many, especially in landlocked states, where their daily impact on the ocean cannot always be observed, which can make it very hard to remain environmentally conscious. Our memorial and celebratory reefs enable every individual or family to celebrate life. Ranging from plaques to individualized sculptures, memorial reefs create a more personal tie to our ocean. The potential of the connection when people know someone or have a family reef in the ocean may in turn make people more environmentally conscious of their actions than they might have been previously. It also gives us an opportunity to experience a different type of life celebration. Instead of visiting a tombstone of your loved one, dive into a world full of life, while knowing each module supports habitat creation and coral restoration, giving everybody the ability to restore our marine environments.
Coral restoration and innovation are needed now more than ever, especially in light of the current dire situation facing our reefs. Our current module is designed to mimic a natural reef with shelves and interior spaces of different sizes to create spaces for both large and small species. We continually investigate and modify our designs so they promote fish recruitment, and also we make changes to the exterior coating on the concrete modules so they are better suited for coral growth and other marine organisms. Each of our modules are embedded with coral locks, a device created to increase outplanting efficiency. Our ability to outplant coral more effectively will determine how successful we are with coral restoration in the future, and we have designed a variety of coral lock receivers to adapt to different restoration activities. The coral locks save time while outplanting and have the adaptive ability to outfit any existing structure with many habitat modules, which can outplant up to 20 corals at a time. Here are photos of the Thousand Mermaids site 9 to 12 months post-deployment. You can see encrusting sponges and algae here, and each time we monitor the site, we see an even greater variety of organisms growing on it.
Some benefits of artificial reefs include habitat creation, increased ecotourism, and community engagement. Diverse habitat provides homes for a variety of fish species, reduces wave action, and creates an opportunity to outplant coral in the future. These unique artistic dive sites promote awareness, increase tourism, and reduce pressure off of natural reefs, as well as providing a local economic improvement and engagement.
Our Thousand Mermaids project has been in quite a few articles recently, including Travel and Leisure on an international scale and the local Palm Beach Post, and we were even featured recently in the NPR's local syndicate, WLRN.
The Thousand Mermaids project is one of Aura's many artistic dive sites to come. We plan to continue to incorporate art and its ability to connect our local communities, incorporating each of these components to create a more sustainable and impactful dive site, along with aiding in fish habitat creation and coral restoration. Our next deployment is scheduled for later this month. Here's a short intro video. Welcome to an inside peek at our next artificial reef deployment with the Ocean Rescue Alliance, ORA. Here at the Ocean Rescue Alliance, we are dedicated to saving our oceans one reef at a time. We could not be more excited to be bringing 55 new reef modules. That is over 88 tons of reef habitat, which we will be adding to our existing 1,000 Mermaids artificial reef site located off of Riviera Beach, Florida. This deployment will feature art, memorials, new habitat designs, the coral reef, and of course, more mermaids. We're deploying our biggest mermaid sculpture to date, and we'll have an additional selfie tail station being added to this site. So come dive, take a picture, and tag us. Follow the Ocean Rescue Alliance for more information. See you on the reef. Welcome to our ORA team, and this project could not be possible without our partner at Reef Cells, Chris O'Hare. Thank you all for tuning in, and please follow our social media at the Ocean Rescue Alliance or check out our website for more information. Have a great day.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you all speakers so much. That was fantastic. My name is Sean Fitzgerald. I'm the newest member of FWC's Artificial Reef team, and you should all know Victor Blanco by now. Yeah, speakers, please turn on your cameras, and we'll ask you some questions. We got a lot of good questions in the chat. But just in case, Victor, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm the Marine Extension Agent for the University of Florida and Florida Sea Grant in Taylor County. And yeah, as Sean just mentioned, those were really outstanding presentations. And we have received some really good questions in the chat. Remember, if you have any question, type it on the chat and we will make sure our presenters go through them. So we can start with Karen and David. There are a couple of questions. With Lauren Floyd asks, how does the cost of these articulated mats with coquina stones compare to the cost of limestone boulders reef?
I guess I'll take that. I don't think Karen or I could really answer that. That would be something that you'd have to ask the county or the engineers. I know the last time I heard, I think an acre of limestone boulders was what, like $500,000 or something like that. Once you mobilize a barge and have a quarry lined up and deploy them. And this requires, usually these modules require fabrication and a lot more labor. But I really I don't want to say because I don't know. And I don't think Karen does either. Is that right? Yeah. But my guess would be it was more, but I just don't know. But it's as far as a habitat, we certainly like this sort of a thing, it's something that had some design to it rather than rolling a bunch of boulders off the barge, which is the norm for these things.
Yeah, I guess the question comes to see if the cost effective of the use of the boulders and these mats, which were a great design, by the way. Sean.
Yeah, I would like to ask Shelby and Stacy, really interesting question here. If you've encountered any pushback from the public in regards to making wild underwater sites look less natural or more anthropogenic.
Yeah, I was sorry. I was just replying in the chat to that too, where my feedback from the diver and public engagement is that they really favor them, but we do a lot to add in natural components as well, and kind of trending towards that. So we have a nice combination of both art and natural looking reef as well.
Yeah, yeah, and just speaking to that, we actually have a lot of people that want to do even more crazy designs. So we actually implement more of like a 3-to-1 ratio where we'll put out natural designs adjacent to the sculpture reefs. But each sculpture has a habitat base that's really our highlight, is creating artificial reef designs that provide biodiverse fish habitat. So just as you guys saw in that little overview video of the next deployment, we're testing out a bunch of different module designs to see what kind of fish recruitment we get and what provides a more biodiverse habitat for those smaller fish species.
Great. Yeah, I noticed you starting to answer in the chat, but I thought it was interesting enough that everyone would want to hear it as well. And so just following up on that, so I was curious, the mermaids themselves also have habitat value. They're not just the artistic draw and you have the natural reef. They themselves have habitat at the base.
Correct. Yeah. So they all have a base habitat. They're not as complex as the shelves as compared to the natural designs. Kind of as the one slide, you could see different shelving that provide smaller micro habitat for smaller fish species. The habitat bases for the sculptures still have a lot of different egresses and holes, but not as complex as the other ones.
Excellent. Thanks.
Just for structure stability.
Sure. All right, Victor.
Yeah, another question for Karen and David is, are the monitoring reports for these projects available somewhere where people can go and download, or you just check? Have you published that in any magazine? Or
I believe they're available on the Brevard County website. If they're not readily, I haven't been to that site, but that's what I was told a while back, that the reports would be available there. And if they're not, it's not obvious where you might be able to download them from. I think the primary contact is Mike McGarry, would be the person there at the county that, but I'm pretty sure that they should be available. And Karen, do you know?
I just looked on the Brevard County website and I don't see them posted just yet. I know right now we're constructing the report to compare like year 1 to year 2. So it may still be in the works. It may not be required yet.
Yeah, that's same with us. We're preparing a sort of a year 2 report, and I don't know if you got the gist of it from our presentation, but this area is very, very challenging to work in. Getting a combination of clear water and no swell is rare, and because of the shallow depths, it's really tough. So we've sampled this year for 2020. We've been able to sample 4 of the 5 reef sites. Last year it was unprecedented how nice it was up there. So we had no problem sampling that, and those were the data that I presented. This year, it's been a real challenge. It's almost impossible to put out the baited video cameras, and for the quantitative photography, we use a low-cut framer with a very wide-angle lens capable of taking a picture in limited visibility at very close range. So we're able to get those kind of data, but the fish data are not together. So anyway, we're both working on additional reports that are going to be submitted very soon, but they may even have partial data in them for that reason.
okay, so people just need to go to the Brevard website or contact you through your email, right?
Yeah, I know we can't send the reports out. It would have to come from somewhere, at least at this point, but they should be available. There should be a way to get them, and maybe we'll see if we can't find that out and provide a link.
Awesome. Thank you. Sean?
Yeah, I can vouch personally for the difficulty of finding some of those reefs. I was in the area this summer doing red snapper volunteering, and I couldn't even find the mats. My visibility, I couldn't see my hand in front of my face, so I know what you're talking about. I actually have a related question to that, which comes from Facebook, so thanks to audience on Facebook Live as well. With some of the Brevard Beach renourishment around Satellite Beach washing back out to sea, have you noticed that affecting your artificial reefs by covering them?
No. Go ahead.
Hang on one second. I was going to say, I just talked to Olson Associates, Dr. Bodge, and he said that one of the reports for the mitigation reef is in press right now. The other one should be posted on the Brevard County site. I didn't see it yet, but yeah, there is one available. And the cost difference, it's those coquina mat, the articulated mattresses, the coquinas. He said they run about twice as much as it would cost to just put boulders in. So I got those answers. That's why I was on the phone.
Good. But as far as the question regarding sediment accumulation, that is one of the things, two things that we go down with, we're diving on them. So we make direct measurements of any of sediment accumulation in every quantitative frame we take and all around the perimeter of the reefs, the mats. And thus far, it's been amazing. I've worked on these where, regardless of the dredge project, a whole acre of boulders can just disappear, under the sand, either by settling or by bed load movement. So we've had none of that thus far. And they also, as part of the monitoring, they shoot multi-beam imagery of all the reefs, I don't know, a couple times a year. So thus far, they've been doing it, but after hurricanes and so forth, and they've been very resilient to anything like that.
Great,
But
great.
time will tell.
Yeah, of course. And I was going to ask a similar question about reef stability to Stacy and Shelby. I think that's being addressed in the chat though. Victor, do you have one queued up?
I don't know if Dr. Eric Nogart is with us. If you are, please turn on your camera. There is a couple of questions for you.
Unfortunately, my camera's blocked. You gotta allow me to.
Okay, but you are with us. Okay, awesome. Do you partner with anyone to help relocate corals, or do you do all the work in-house?
Well, it depends. There are regulatory requirements for the relocation of corals. We have permits. You also have to have a special activities license from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. But with the example that I gave of the Southport Turning Notch Extension Project, where we relocated the corals offshore, there were remaining corals that we made available to research institutes. There were about 2,000 plus corals that were voluntarily removed and just provided to them to do research. We're trying to find additional opportunities in our partnership with the South Florida Association of Environmental Professionals to provide additional opportunities for the public to get involved with the relocation process, but that's still something in the works. So we're looking at those opportunities.
Okay, great. And there's another question. What were the site selection criteria for the coral relocation? You mentioned some were offshore, but you found some problems after the relocation with a low survival. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
There's quite a bit of a learning opportunity for us there, where there's significant parrotfish predation from the corals we were relocated from the Southport Turning Notch. And we did not anticipate that because we had the same species of parrotfish, both inland where the corals were taken from and then offshore where they were outplanted to. So with an upcoming project for our Slip 1 expansion project, we have identified a location inland in the Danny Cutoff Canal where the corals from that project will be relocated. And then going back to the question about engaging the public in doing the relocation, on that particular project, the resource agencies are now requiring us to relocate all corals greater than 5 centimeters. So there's going to be very few corals that remain after that project for anybody else to do anything with.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sean?
Yeah, one more for Shelby and or Stacy. How far along is the Mermaids project, and what early returns are you seeing in terms of, I think we saw one slide of 9 to 12 months afterwards. So kind of what are you seeing in terms of coral or fish recruitment, human use, and what are the monitoring efforts that you're undertaking?
Right. So we currently go out quarterly to monitor different fish population dynamics and recruitment. We have a lot of growth and we're starting to see a little bit of coral recruitment, but what we're looking to do is actually start outplanting corals. So we're working on getting added to a special activities license to be able to hopefully outplant corals of opportunity on the site. We currently have coral locks at the 1,000 Mermaids site, but no corals at the site. We've been conducting different tests over the last year to see how the coral locks are holding up, as well as our mini habitat modules. And we're actually outplanting coral with the Coral Restoration Foundation, Sea Corps International, and the University of Miami in South Florida. So, but those are on our miniature mini habitat modules. So that's actually on natural reefs. So we're really looking forward to seeing some of those results as far as actually getting real coral on the modules themselves. But we do have that ability to add them to our site. We just need to get connected with people like Eric to hopefully be able to add corals very soon and see how that's implemented.
And also those modules just went out in August of 2019. So that is pretty much like what they are right now. So it's really great to see that progress. And our new deployment going out hopefully soon, then we'll have another cycle of that. And then we'll be having the citizen science engagement to monitor those with us as well.
Perfect, great. And I think it's hard to keep track of the chat. I'm not sure if you answered this, but someone was wondering what exactly are the coral locks made of?
Yeah, so the coral locks are made of the CSA cement, as well as silica, basalt fibers, and also calcium carbonate. Our reef builder's Chris O'Hare has been with Reef Cells, has been building reefs for over 30 years. And he's come up with this very finite process that really creates really good stability. And our reefs have been really strong and has held up through all the storms for this past year, including Irma. So it's been really great.
Excellent, excellent. All right, I think we've got about 2 minutes left. Victor, if you have anything.
Yeah, I would like to invite Keith Mealy to turn on his camera because Dr. Limber put a question. What are the prospects for FWC's artificial reef program to be more strategically integrated with mitigation and diver art objectives? That's a great question.
Yeah, that's really a great
with
question.
The mermaid
Bill.
reef. Hayward Matthews here. With the mermaid reef, have they thought of what anchor damage is going to happen?
So, sorry, Hayward. Let me answer Bill Lindbergh's question here first, because I think that's a really great question as far as FWC's contribution to mitigation and these art form reefs. As many of you know, we have our annual grant program, and it's probably through the projects that we fund that we have the greatest direct influence. When it comes to mitigation reefs and many of these art form reefs, the funding sources are not coming from our program. So that is where we rely. In the case of mitigation reefs, we will weigh in on during the permit review process. And as far as the art form reefs, same thing. All these art forms must comply with the permits, and we rely on the permits are held by the county artificial reef managers. So in the case of many of these mermaid reefs, those are being deployed in Palm Beach County. And I really commend Jenna McNeil and Carmen Vare for working with the Thousand Mermaids team on making improvements to hopefully incorporate some of these habitat objectives that we would like to achieve. And so where we don't have influence in funding, it's our hope that summits and workshops just like this, getting people connected to each other, some of the latest science can be incorporated into these designs. But I agree, Bill, I think it is a challenge and something that we need to continue to work on.
And it pains me to do this, but we're 1 minute past our break time, so we've got to go. Everybody's contact info is in the chat. Feel free to reach out. And there were more great questions as well that I have earmarked that hopefully we can let the folks know in the panel discussion at the end of the day, and they can address those. So thanks again to all the speakers. Fantastic stuff. And we'll see you in the next session at 10:10 or 10:15? 10:10, quickly. All righty. We'll see you in a few minutes. Bye-bye.